Welcome to the Local School Governance Series, which has been developed by the Avondale Business School on behalf of Adventist Schools Australia for Seventh-day Adventist schools who are part of the ASA network. This presentation is made by Warrick, the current head of the Avondale Business School. In this particular program, we will be looking specifically at having effective local school advisory council meetings within the SDA schools. Adventist Schools Australia has commissioned a series of governance resources to assist local schools in fulfilling their governance responsibilities. This particular program explores how to conduct meetings of the local school advisory council that are effective. It considers the role of various participants, the value of good preparation, and introduces some basic meeting procedures. We will begin this program by looking at the value of effective meetings before delving into the role of the School Advisory Council, various participants, and some introductory meeting procedures. Finally, we'll propose some next steps for you to consider before highlighting a number of key and free governance resources that are available to you. Before landing in the deep end though, let's spend a few moments talking about meetings. As a group, spend a few moments, say 6 or 7 minutes, and just find out what each of you would rather do if you had 3 hours to spare. Would you rather A, go to a 3-hour movie or a similar activity, or B, attend a 3-hour meeting? And then work out why. Why would people choose one or the other? So pause this presentation for a few minutes, 6 or 7 suggested, longer if you like. Find out what everyone in your group would prefer and why. When you finish your discussion, simply restart this presentation to continue. What was the consensus of your group? If you are like the overwhelming majority of groups, most people would prefer to go to the movie. Why is that? Well, it seems to be that many people feel that movies have more drama, action and interest, but in my view they're much more passive. Meetings sometimes lack drama and are just boring or just a formality. However, in my view, meetings that are done well can change lives and impact the world for good, and that beats going to a movie anytime. So we're going to look at the characteristics of what a good meeting might look like and try and make your time worthwhile. We seem to spend so much time in committees, so we may as well make them as efficient and as effective as possible. One resource that I would recommend straight away is the book Death by Meeting, the cover of which is displayed on this slide. It's written by Patrick Lencioni, and he explores the ideas of meetings being much better than movies. It's a very easy read and highly recommended. A key component of effective meetings is to understand the purpose of the particular meeting, which ensures you spend your time focusing on what is important rather than taking detours into irrelevant areas. In the first program of this governance series, we looked in detail at the Local School Advisory Council. To give us a good context for the purpose of the meetings, we will review briefly the role of the Local School Advisory Council now. Most importantly, we need to remember that the Local School Advisory Council is an advisory body to the principal of the school. It is the principal who has the responsibility for the day-to-day management of the school. Also note that the Local School Advisory Council is obligated to the entire conference schools company, not just an individual school. And the conference schools company will delegate particular responsibilities to the Local School Advisory Council and operational management to the principal. The principal and the School Advisory Council then collaborate in order to effectively meet their respective delegations. As noted in the previous slide, the Local School Advisory Council is required to be faithful to the various policies and procedures of the conference schools company. The delegations that they may be sent from the conference schools company could include approving submissions to the conference schools company, for example budgets or strategic plans. They may include overseeing the compliance regime of the school, and could well include participating in the Quality Adventist Schools framework for school improvement. It's also very important for the local school advisory council to regularly undertake reflection and review of the mission of the Seventh-day Adventist School and its quality and effectiveness. And this can probably best be achieved largely through participation in the Quality Adventist Schools framework process. Having reviewed the role of the local school advisory council, we now have a context for it and an indication of what issues and items it should be dealing with. We're now going to look in this next section at the local school advisory council members' role and function. Let's firstly engage in another activity, this time with what we would understand a good council member to be. That is, what behaviours, characteristics, etc. might best describe the type of council member you would all ideally want on your local school advisory. So pause this program now for say 6 or 7 minutes and then restart it when you've concluded your discussion and got a picture of your ideal local school advisory council member. With that picture of the ideal local school advisory council member in mind, let us now spend some time looking at what that might actually entail. Local school advisory council members know the members' code of conduct and operate in harmony with it. This code of conduct was explained in some detail in the first of the governance series programs. It's important for local school advisory council members to also understand the role of the advisory. That is, why does it actually exist? Knowing the purpose means that you can stay on task and stay focused and not waste time on other unrelated issues. It's also important to read supporting material before the meeting. That is, turn up to the meeting knowing what is going on. Don't waste everybody's time asking questions that are probably answered in the support material. It also means that the meeting itself does not need to go over this material, but instead can take it as read. However, that does mean that people need to schedule time before the meeting to go over it. It also means that perhaps you might choose to seek clarification from the chair or the principal prior to the meeting on issues in the agenda that might be relevant. A good place to start in building a solid foundation is found in Galatians chapter 5 verses 22 to 23. These characteristics provide some really good basis on which a good meeting is based. These are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Do you remember all of these characteristics? Well, these are the behaviours that we want to have in our local school advisory council meetings. With these in place, we're on a very solid foundation for effective meetings. Adding to these behaviours are some essential characteristics for a local school advisory council member, and these provide an aspirational benchmark for all of our members. These would include being a spiritual person. A member manifests the fruits of the Spirit as found in Galatians chapter 5 verses 22 to 23. A member would also have integrity. That is, a member fulfills their responsibility, acts ethically, displays appropriate independence, and puts the organisation's interests before their personal interests. Would also be emotionally intelligent, as well as a self-awareness and self-management. That is, a member needs to demonstrate empathy, manifested through strong interpersonal skills. A member must work well in a group, listen well, be tactful, yet able to communicate a cogent and candid viewpoint. The member should also have a degree of commercial judgment and instinct. That is, a member needs to demonstrate good business instinct and acumen and be able to assimilate and synthesize somewhat complex information at times. Also, loyal engagement, whereby a member will be an active contributor with genuine interest in the school and its mission. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, the member needs to be collaborative, yet curious and courageous. A member must be able to function as an effective team member, but also must have curiosity to ask questions and the courage to persist in robust discussion with the management and fellow council members where necessary. This last one is particularly important as it ensures the greatest potential for effective meetings. The Australian Institute of Company Directors has developed 10 tips for directors that add to the effectiveness of meetings. These tips have equal applicability for the local school advisory council, and we're going to go through them one by one here. The first one is to read the board papers carefully in advance and understand any issues. We can't emphasise that enough because a well-prepared council member ensures for effective meetings. Honour the valuable time of everybody in the meeting by arriving on time, every time. Thirdly, listen carefully to what others are saying. Listen before speaking. Stephen Covey, the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, says to seek first to understand, then to be understood. The fourth is to be willing to question and challenge. Again, that's to be courageous. It's unlikely that there's nobody else in the meeting who hasn't got the same question as you. Be the bold person and don't be afraid to ask. And be supportive of other people's contributions. That is, be collaborative in your approach. Remain loyal to the decisions of the board, even where you may not have agreed with it. Remember that a decision of the local school advisory council binds everyone, and you have a duty to support it. The 7th point is to maintain confidentiality regarding board deliberations. That's very critical. Trust is one of the key foundations of effective meetings. Also, agree to accept special assignments between meetings, and that would probably be, in most cases, a subcommittee appointment. And then develop a thorough knowledge of the organisation and the industry sector it operates in. Or in other words, understand your school and its community. And then finally, declare conflicts of interest or avoid them where possible. That's as much for your protection as for anything else. In winding up this section on the local school advisory council member and effective meetings, we have 3 things to think about. The first is the role of laptops and smartphones in the meeting. In other words, does it affect your ability to stay focused if people are on these machines all the time? Does it impact on your ability to listen well? However, you do need to understand that people may also be using it for the agenda and support material that they've been sent electronically. You as a council should address this and develop a protocol for the use of laptops and smartphones in meetings. Secondly, in my experience over many years of meetings, members typically fall into one of 2 groups, shotguns and snipers. Shotguns fire a broad shot but are ineffective beyond a very short distance. That is, these are the people who talk to every item on the agenda and eventually the other members cease listening to them and they become ineffective. Whereas snipers take very few shots, but when they do, they are usually very effective and on target over a very long range. These are the people who speak only circumspectly, and on the occasion that they do, people listen and take notice. So think about that. Which one are you, a shotgun or a sniper? And which do you think is most effective? And then finally, read the minutes. What are the minutes? Well, they are a record of what has transpired in the meeting. They are not a verbatim account, and they include enough information to give clear reasons what was discussed and why the decision was made. They are the official record, and I cannot stress how important it is to get them right, because the courts may use minutes over testimony in a legal case. It's important that you read them as soon as they come out while your memory is still fresh of what happened in the meeting. Waiting for the next meeting, which may be a month or more away, is too long, and memories fade and consumes too much time in the next meeting going through them all. So when you receive the minutes, read them and contact the secretary or chair if you have any questions or potential alterations. So we've just spent some time looking at the role local school advisory council members play in effective meetings. Let's turn our attention now to some specific roles within the meeting, and in this case, that of the local school advisory council chair. This will only be a brief overview, as there is another program in this governance series that looks specifically at the role of the chair and delves quite deeply into it. As mentioned, this is a brief overview because the chair is a separate presentation in this series. The appointment of the chair is by the Conference Schools Company Board of Directors on the advice of the Conference Director of Education, who has consulted with the principal. The role of the chair is to work with the Secretary of the local school advisory council, who is the principal, to ensure that the meetings are run in an orderly and efficient manner. This will include collaborating on the agenda for each meeting, setting a calendar of meeting dates for the year, and a number of other issues like that. Their role is also to ensure that the meeting is run in an orderly manner. Similarly, with the local school advisory council secretary, there is a separate dedicated program in this governance series for that, but we will briefly overview that role now. As there is a separate presentation, this overview will be just quite brief. But their appointment, as for the secretary, it's the principal, which is an ex officio role or by virtue of their position as principal. However, someone else may be appointed as a recording secretary to assist the principal with that role. It may be an executive assistant or a secretary of the school or another local school advisory council member or even someone else again. So the role of the secretary is essentially to support the chair and the members by arranging and organising the meeting and then communicating needed information before and after the meeting. This includes the minutes. So there is a brief overview of the role, and as mentioned, there is another dedicated program just for the secretary. There are a number of things that can be done before a meeting that, as a local school advisory council and individual council members, will ensure the meetings are as efficient and effective as possible. We're going to spend just a few moments now reviewing what these might be. As a group, let's do a small activity. Let's spend a few moments discussing what your expectations are regarding some key aspects of the meeting. Clarifying these will help ensure that everyone is on the same page. So as a group, take say 10 minutes, no more, and then think about how frequently you would like your meetings to be. What time you would like them to start. What's the latest time you think the meeting should finish? And how long before the meeting would you like to receive your agenda? So pause this program for a few moments, maybe 10 at the most, and then discuss these aspects, and then restart the meeting to continue. Hopefully your group has managed to clarify some of these key points about your meetings. Let's look at a few tips. Where will your meeting be held? Will it be at the school or somewhere else? Is it in the library? Is it in the staff room? Is it in the classroom? You need to ensure that everybody knows exactly where and how to get to these meetings. What day and time will you meet? Will it be during the week or on the weekend? Both of these times have advantages and disadvantages, but what works best for your council? And what time? If it's too late in the evening, it limits the amount of time you have. But if it's too early in the evening, it will exclude some people who have other commitments. What time will you finish? If you leave this open, meetings have a tendency to drag on, but setting a finishing time focuses people. Also, if the meeting runs too late into the evening, people tend to get too tired, discussions take longer, and tempers can flare much more easily. And then finally, how frequently will you meet? Remembering that the local school advisory council is required to meet a minimum of 6 times per year. Is that enough for your group? More frequent but shorter meetings can accomplish more, but then that depends on other people's availability. An important part of preparing for a meeting, which makes them much more effective, is to prepare and send out the agenda and support material before the meeting itself. Local School Advisory Council members then have the opportunity to read it all beforehand, which saves considerable time in the meeting. It's true that this process may take the Local School Advisory Council Secretary a bit of time to do so, however it does save the council meeting much more time and is well worth the effort. When will it be sent out? Will it be sent out the day before, a week before, etc.? How much time? Deciding how the agenda will be distributed is also important, whether it's by email, via an envelope sent home in the child's school bag, or by ordinary postal mail. Each of these has its advantages, but important consideration is confidentiality and security of information. Are you the only person, for example, with access to your nominated email address? Will your child potentially lose the envelope on the way home from school? Or who else might collect your mail and open it? Finally, as individual members of the Local School Advisory Council, you can do a few things to make these meetings much more effective as well. We've stressed this a number of times already, but read the agenda and support material before the meeting. Be informed so that discussion can be focused and efficient. Perhaps before the meeting, you may wish to clarify some questions or issues you have regarding the agenda with the chair and or the principal, and that can speed up a lot of meeting times. Also, by being engaged with your school and its community, you develop an awareness that will provide context and background to many of the items that appear on the agenda. And then remember, before the meeting, pray about the upcoming meeting, the agenda items, the principal and the chair. Commit these to God and seek His wisdom and counsel for the meeting. There is much that can be covered regarding meeting procedures, ranging from the very formal to quite casual. The Local School Advisory Council should be based on a collegial consensus basis, but will on occasion require a bit more formality. In this section of the presentation, we'll cover the fundamentals needed to ensure there is a degree of structure to ensure meetings run effectively. Recapping from the first presentation in this governance series, there is a requirement for a minimum of 6 meetings per year, and the chair, in consultation with the Director of Education and the principal, determine these dates and makes them available to the Local School Advisory Council members and the school community. The quorum, or the minimum number of members needed to be in attendance for the meeting to be valid, is a simple majority of the members. That is, a Local School Advisory Council of 5 would require 3 members to be present. If there was a council of 9, they would require 5, and so on. Note though that irrespective of the number attending, in all cases, the principal must be one of those in attendance. We're going to spend a quick moment or two in the background to meeting conduct. Meeting conduct in Australia has its origins in the British parliamentary system. It is also in our own Australian Parliament and can be quite lively at times. The Local School Advisory Councils are much less formal and don't follow strictly the parliamentary processes, but rather an abbreviated version of them. And in this case, they operate in a collegial and supportive way. However, there is still a need for a degree of formality to ensure that there is structure to the meeting that allows it to function smoothly. This formality would include things like an agenda listing the items to be discussed in an orderly fashion. It would include the chair directing discussion somewhat so that everyone's not all speaking at the same time. And it would also include members speaking to the issue and not branching out to unrelated topics. When it is time to make a decision and to come to an agreement, the goal for a Local School Advisory Council should be for decisions to be made by consensus, but it may be necessary to have a more formal vote, and in those occasions, a simple majority, which is 50% or more of the members attending the meeting, carries the vote. The chair does not have a casting vote, and invitees to the meeting have no vote. Where there may still be disagreement between the Local School Advisory Council and the principal, then the matter is to be referred to the Conference Director of Education to seek their advice. Note that the status quo of the situation prevails until otherwise resolved. Also note that there is no form of proxy or mail email votes. Members must be present for their vote to count. It's not uncommon when talking about meetings to hear terms like motions, resolutions, moving a motion, etc. in the context of a meeting. We will look briefly at these, and there may be on occasions when it is appropriate to use these in a local school advisory council meeting. A proposal put forward to the meeting for the purpose of eliciting a decision is simply called a motion. An example of a motion would be, I move that all students be required to achieve 65% in order to pass this subject. That then is a proposal that we now can discuss. If a motion is passed by vote, it becomes a resolution, and in the minutes it's commonly recorded as resolved that, or sometimes instead the term voted is used instead of resolution. Technically, in a meeting, the chair can refuse to accept a motion, which may be done if it is irrelevant, distracting, or unsuitable at that particular time. And if someone wants a motion considered, it's known as moving a motion. Going back to our example, I move that all students be required to achieve 65% in order to pass this subject. It's usual that before a motion is discussed or voted, someone seconds it, which indicates that there are sufficient people interested to warrant a discussion. When somebody seconds a motion, it indicates there is support for that motion to be discussed, which then proceeds to discussion. When there is no seconder for a motion, it lapses, or in other words, it's not discussed any further. Once a motion has been moved and seconded, it is then available for discussion. That is, it can be spoken to in an orderly fashion. So that's it. That's running effective meetings. It's not that hard, is it, after all? With just a few basic protocols and practices, your local school advisory council can maximise time and be an effective meeting. Having taken a whirlwind tour through how to be an effective local school advisory council meeting, there are a few things that you as a group may wish to consider next. You may wish to confirm as a group a number of things. Firstly, your meetings. When will they be held? What day of the week? What time of the day? How frequently? Where will they be held? And how long will they go? What's the latest time you'll finish? And my advice is, stick to it. You may also wish to think about the agenda for the meeting. When will it be sent out? The day before? The week before? And by what means will it be sent out? Email, snail mail, etc. That brings us nearly to the end of this presentation. Let's just spend a few moments looking back at what we've covered. We looked at how effective meetings are better than movies and can actually change the world. We also looked at the role of the local school advisory council so we know what the meetings should focus on. We also looked at the role of the individual local school advisory council member and how they play in being effective in meetings. We briefly touched on the role of the chair and also on the role of the secretary. We saw the value of being prepared for meetings and how that saves time. We also looked at some fundamentals in meeting procedures. And then finally, there were some suggested next steps to ensure your local school advisory councils are effective and efficient. Before we conclude this presentation, there are a range of resources available to local schools and their advisory council members in relation to good governance and advisory councils. Here are a range of those resources that you might find useful, including from Adventist Schools Australia and the Avondale Business School. Thank you for your participation. We hope you found it very useful. We'd very much appreciate if you would complete a very brief anonymous feedback survey that will help us to continue to improve the resources we offer you. Simply go to the survey via the link on this website. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to contact either Adventist Schools Australia or the Avondale Business School. Best wishes for your local school advisory council.